Good morning and good New Year to you. Today is January 8th, and it has not gone unnoticed by you, I'm sure, that the world is ablaze with all kinds of serious problems and some possibility of things getting more serious than they even are today. Needless to say, one of the things one could focus on today is the Middle East. And I do want to focus on the Middle East, but not until 2 weeks from now. I want to speak more broadly today, which is why the talk is entitled Danger Lurks Here, There, and Everywhere, to kind of contextualize some of what is going on, broadly speaking, which is affecting many countries and many policies, and which has an impact on the specific issues, for example, the Middle East and other things that I want to talk in subsequent talks. So let me start by saying that amongst the things I want to address today on a sort of a global scale is arms, climate, immigration, the US election, and the proliferation of authoritarianism everywhere. Many of these issues impact the specific issues that I want to address in subsequent talks, but I think it's kind of useful to sort of say the state of things with respect to these topics. So let's first take arms. The world is full of arms. America is proud of saying that it has the strongest military, which indeed it does. It also is a major supplier of arms to many places in the world. And the ability of so many countries to have access to arms influences both their capacity to act and their desire to have arms in case they want to act. So, for example, a little country like Yemen, which I'll talk about in 2 weeks, which is busy trying to blow up ships in the Red Sea, how can such a basically destroyed through civil war country, poverty, illness, whatnot, have the wherewithal to have the missiles and the wherewithal to do the things they're doing in the Red Sea, which is the fact that many ships now will have to go around South Africa, which lengthens their trip and makes products that we buy more expensive. Why do they have all these arms? Well, or where do they get them from? They're not manufacturing them. Well, they get them from Iran, which is a major arms producer and distributor amongst countries it allies or controls, including, you might have noticed in the newspaper, that Iran is sending arms or helping Russia with arms for its fight in the Ukraine. So it isn't just the major arms producing countries like the United States, like France, like Russia for that matter, and increasingly like China, but it is that the arms producers are distributing these arms amongst lesser players, and they're not distributing, handguns. They are distributing missiles and drones and all the contemporary arms capability, which has an impact and can have an impact in various countries in the world very, very quickly. Who benefits from all of those? Well, regimes which wish to control their neighbors, their enemies, and so forth, but of course also the arms industry. And the arms industry is not capable, even in the United States, to produce arms as quickly as they're being chewed up. So both the amount of arms, the type of arms, and the capacity to move these arms around as a matter of policy is in some ways unique in global history. and has an impact. That is not to say, I don't want to oversell this idea, that is not to say that in the past, the arms producers like the United States, like France, which is a fairly major arms producer, like Russia and so forth, haven't sold their arms to other countries and that they haven't been used. But the type of countries that are being armed with weapons that have an impact that is consistent with contemporary modern technology. By that I mean not just, hand weapons and not just tanks, but also, as I said, missiles and drones and so forth, which can be deployed quickly and used, is a phenomenon both in kind as well as in quantity. And it's having a major impact on what countries are able to do, what they want to do, how countries, for example, Russia, China, the United States, Iran, are able to pursue policies overseas very easily and in some senses quickly, although at very great cost. That is in some senses phenomenal, and I think it will accelerate rather than slow down in the year to come, in 2024. The second category is climate. Climate, is being bandied around. There's climate change. No doubt, even from watching TV over the holidays, there are massive floods from, England to Pakistan to parts of the United States, to rivers overflowing and decimating villages in France. That is to say, the level of water rising on the one hand, oceans rising, the climate change as in warmer climates, and the entire climate change on a global scale, which is in one way or another being felt everywhere, is not just an interesting problem for those of us who are interested in climate change, or for scientists who are working and studying climate change, but is now a matter that is almost global in reach, is affecting more or less every country in the world as we speak, and will do so even more throughout this year and in the rest of the decade. And that is not just a sort of observation about nature and science. That has a serious impact on the domestic and international politics on a global scale. It may impact, for example, food. It may impact habitability. It may impact immigration, which I'll talk about in a minute. It may impact countries panicking and possibly having conflict with neighbors that they accuse of enhancing climate change. So this is very much at the forefront, both of what individual people will be experiencing and are experiencing around the world in 2024, but will have a serious impact on the domestic politics and the international politics of almost every corner of the world. And while we may see blips of this now, if you're just, sitting in Santa Cruz and watching the TV, the fact of the matter is that the dislocation, the economic harm, the impossible relationship of people to their governments and governments amongst each other when these climatological crises occur is at the height of not just scientific and climate policy agendas, but the political agendas both of international institutions and national governments. So that then leads me to the third category, which is immigration or emigration. That's a hot topic in the United States, right? stop all these people coming across the border. It's a hot topic in Europe. Do people, even countries that were hospitable to lots of immigration, like England and Germany, do they want to slow down immigration? What are the political and economic impacts of in various countries in the world? What about human rights? Do people who, pay people to put them on little boats that aren't safe and drowning, is that an acceptable way to proceed? And immigration, I think, is at the political forefront in almost all countries in the world. Now, what's interesting about it is that it produces two kinds of political consequences, I might say. One is the kind of political consequence of people saying, well, we can't just handle these people, they're all going to be on the dole. Whether that's accurate or not doesn't seem to matter in terms of political rhetoric. But more specifically, immigration to countries which used to be fairly homogeneous is having a political impact in those countries. I'll talk about in a couple of minutes about rising authoritarianism everywhere. But the fact that countries like Sweden, countries like other Scandinavian countries, but even countries like Spain and France, which used to be hospitable to immigration from their earlier colonies or as a matter of post-World War II philosophy, even these countries have a fair chunk of the population bulk against or oppose the idea of having immigration. That, in some senses, divides into two. One, countries which ideologically, when they had a fairly liberal or at least centrist or socialist government, welcomed this as a matter of morality and policy. And second of all, countries which are in need of immigration because of their declining population. So there's both a push that countries don't welcome because they had nothing to do with these people wanting to relocate, and they decide they shouldn't relocate in their countries. And on the other hand, increasingly countries have to face up to the fact that they need immigration, new people, because of their aging population. So in most of Europe, in the United States, in Japan, and down the road in countries like China and Indonesia, even, you will have the need for immigration, even though you may not particularly want people from other ethnic groups, other language groups, other religion. So it's an interesting topic because while the people are fleeing because of climate change, because of civil wars, because of all the reasons that people believe they can no longer safely live in their country. And on the other hand, there is that's the outward immigration, the emigration, right? On the other hand, increasingly many countries are having to face up to the fact that they actually need immigrants. And then the question becomes, will they accept anybody who wants to come, or are they going to be prejudiced against certain racial groups, against certain religious groups, and so forth? In any particular moment in time, there are about 60 million people walking about the world trying to leave where they are and trying to get somewhere else. As I said, sometimes because of conflict and war, for example, Afghanistan, post these years of conflict. But there are also, people from West Africa, from this, who are leaving because of the economic circumstances. And there also are people who are quite educated, whose economies are not able to absorb their technological and educational capacities and wish to relocate to countries that might need their capabilities. All of this is leading to a large proportion of the population, maybe 50% in quite a few countries, including the United States, having become anti-immigration for reasons that are more or less propaganda from a variety of sources that are not necessarily accurately reflecting either the number of people that are coming, the type of people that are coming, or the country's need for actually have people come. So let's take the US, what I guess we know most about right now, right? The anti-immigration politics are quite active, lively, and strong in the US right now. Both the Trump and other Republican candidates, as well as Democrats, quite a few of them, are now anti-immigration. Let's stop these people coming in from every direction. Now, one of the things, of course, one can say in the US is that many people are not anti-immigration per se, but rather anti the messiness, the large numbers of people who are coming without having, obvious accommodations and having jobs and the rest of it. So sometimes people who are quite knowledgeable and even in favor of immigration believe we need to change our immigration law. That seems to be quite universal. But a large proportion of the population is also anti-immigration, even if it were more orderly. Why? Because all these people, who speak different languages, look different, are, arising all over the place. And, who wants them? Who needs them? You can see people in small towns in the Middle West, for example, saying, we used to be this nice homogeneous town, and now there's these Indians and these Hispanic speakers, and they're running shops, and they're all over the place, and the community has changed. And their feeling is a conservative one, as in, we don't really want change, we don't really welcome change. Now, I hasten to say, if you go back until after or post-World War II into the 50s, even early 60s, there was also anti-immigration, especially amongst the political right. And the anti-immigration was not against the people who are coming nowadays, but were against Italians and Irish, for example. There was quite a lot of prejudice, whether it was Boston or New York, against Irish and Italians. And in New York City, which has always had, 40, 50, 60% people born somewhere other than in the United States, there was quite a lot of anti-Jewish feeling at times. You would see things in the newspapers and hear things on the radio, for example, like the New York City university system, the place is full of Jewish people. Why, never mind that the people who got in there were the ones that wanted to study in the university and so forth. And immigrants in general are upwardly mobile and try to get as many skills and university training. But this were not people of color that people object to now, but a different group of immigrants. So we in the United States are a nation of immigrants. But we've politically have often railed against either a particular group of immigrants or when a large number of immigrants come. Now, the American population is not aging as quickly as others because we're constantly getting younger immigrants. But we still need about 1 million new workers in our labor force. And where they're going to come from is not the heavens. They are going to come from immigrants by and large. We have a fairly slow birth rate, much larger birth rate than many European countries because, as I said, younger people and immigrants are coming in. But the per capita number of children people have in the United States is also slowing down. So what I'm saying here is, and I'm sort of mumbling over lots of topics, is that climate change as well as political instability and climate change and its impact on the economy and political changes that are produced because you have right-wing and authoritarian governments are all merging, in a sense, in producing more people who are trying or need to flee their countries and wish to relocate where opportunities are greater. There's every reason to believe that within this decade, almost all countries will have much larger mixture of populations than they currently have. And so national identity will have to, in some senses, be forged in the way that over the decades and centuries the US has forged it, namely to try to integrate people as quickly as possible, to give people the opportunity to become nationals of the country they live in, to be respected, to have educational opportunity, and so forth. Unless this moves forward in all the countries in the world which will be impacted by immigration, you will see more political havoc of one kind or another. Which then leads me to the next major topic, and that is, why is the world having such a rise in authoritarian governments? Almost everywhere in the world where elections are going to be taking place this year, by the way, about 70 countries have election this year, it is hypothesized that whoever was in office will be thrown out and a more authoritarian type leader will come to the fore. For example, Trump, for example, the new president of Argentina, for example, the turn to the right in Italy, for example, the prospect that Marie Le Pen may replace Macron in France, and on we go. And why is this? Well, it's hard. There's not a single answer. But one of the broad answers is that in ordinary people who don't have a very necessarily sophisticated idea about what's going on in the world, but who, listen to their local TV stations, which, by the way, are mostly owned by right-wing companies like Sinclair, and therefore present a kind of fairly right-wing news, similar to Fox, although not necessarily as extreme. At least the editorials tend to be right-wing. Nevertheless, feel that everything is unstable, right? Climate change is affecting them. It's either too hot or too cold, or there's too much water or something. So much of the tax money of arms-producing countries seem to go increasingly to arms, although that's not necessarily new, but that's come to people's attention again. Immigration is, all these people are arriving. What are they doing? Why are they coming? They're disturbing our sense of national identity. And in general, whatever ails you as a person in terms of the society you live in, or what ails your group or your city or your country, you want to blame on whoever was in power, which in most countries might have been, up until recently, fairly centrist, to some extent left, but also very centrist people. And you would like to elect someone who has the answer. Think Trump for a minute, right? Trump has answers. He can fix everything. All the bad things happening, he will make them go away. Climate change, well, it doesn't really exist, and in any event, coal is a good thing, so let's support the coal industry. All these green people are sort of yo-yos. Much of that is just left-wing propaganda. He will stop, people coming into the country, not just, unemployed refugees from places, but these foreigners who had visas to work in the tech industry and so forth. We're going to not need those people or want those people. Let's not have all kinds of foreigners in our American universities. A lot of them may be spies, particularly the Chinese. Well, more or less anybody who looks Asian. That's probably not a good thing to have in your universities, and so forth and so on. You get the whole right-wing agenda, whether it's Trump in the United States, whether it's Le Pen in France, whether it's any leaders in, possibly even in Southeast Asia. Indonesia will have an election and so forth. Because when everything seems to be haywire and unstable, and you're feeling that maybe your children and grandchildren won't fare as well, and housing prices are high, and food is expensive, and it's too hot or too cold, and somebody comes along and says, that's all because the previous government didn't do X and Y, and I'm going to come in and fix it all. It's not a big problem. And you won't have to have these debates, and you won't have, I will take care of things. And so authoritarianism of the right, or for that matter, even of the left, is a universal solvent for people who have reason to feel unsettled, unnerved, and bothered by the incredible complexity and interdependence in the world right now, but also in the sort of unknowns and spooky aspect of what climate change is producing. So one of the central issues, I think, that almost all countries, the 70 countries who have elections, including the United States, as well as all countries in the next few years, have to confront, is that there is this feeling in most countries, throw the bastards out and let's listen to somebody who says he, she can fix it all. And of course, the problems that are befalling us in 2024, both in terms of current wars and conflicts and climate change and economics and so forth, aren't going to get any better. They will get worse in this decade. And when things are complex and interdependent, presumptively many of the solutions are also complex and interdependent. And if you're feeling that your surroundings are somewhat out of control, whether it's political or climate or in terms of people, then somebody who has answers becomes very, very attractive. So overriding the specifics of the Middle East and instability in various European countries, and even socialist democratic countries like Scandinavians who've in recent election elected right-wing people in their parliaments, or a larger number of them, or whether it's the increasing authoritarianism in many ways in China, or whether it's the increasing authoritarianism in India. Modi, in many ways, the head of the Indian government, is very authoritarian, taking away freedom of the press, jailing journalists, making life difficult for anybody who does not approve one's government. One could look in Asia, one could look in East Asia, Southeast Asia, Middle East, Europe, Africa, South America, in many countries. The national politics of countries are very, very stable at the moment. And the instability is not leading to a kind of a sophisticated discussion about the problems are complex and the solutions are complex, but rather is producing a tendency in many countries, which essentially says, let's select somebody who's going to cut through all of this and who has the answers. There, I say at the end today that almost none of these problems have simple answers. None of them can be resolved nationally. And therefore, it is really, really important to sensitize oneself to the fact that there are interlinkages and interdependence amongst these different issues. They may present in different ways in different countries in different parts of the world, but it is all part of a very difficult time that countries, peoples, the natural environment is going through. Okay, so next time I promise to get down to specific policies, and probably we'll talk about the Middle East. See you in 2 weeks.